My name is Lorraine Whitlow. I'm 82 years old. And until last Thanksgiving, I thought my family still loved me. I wore my best ivory sweater that morning, the one with tiny embroidered leaves on the collar. I had ironed my slacks the night before, reheated a warm apple cobbler, and even tied a burnt orange ribbon around the pan. Thanksgiving had always meant something to me, a time when memories were thicker than gravy. I thought maybe this year, despite all the strange silences, my son Brent and his wife Clarissa had planned something warm for me. When I rang their doorbell, Clarissa opened it with a smile as wide as a Thanksgiving spread. "You made it, Lorraine," she said. "Not Mom. Not Mother. Just Lorraine." That should have told me everything. I stepped inside and immediately noticed the silence. No music. No chatter. No grandkids running up to hug me. Only their voices and another I didn't recognize. A man in a pinstripe suit stood by the fireplace. He nodded at me like I was walking into a courtroom. Brent stood stiffly. Clarissa reached for my cobbler and placed it on the counter like it was an offering to some cold altar. Then Brent cleared his throat. "Before we eat," he said, "there's something we need to discuss." I stood still. My fingers clutched the handle of my purse tighter. The ribbon from the cobbler pan fluttered to the ground like a warning. "I'm sure you remember the loan you took from us 3 years ago," Brent began. His tone was formal, almost practiced. "What loan?" I blinked. "You gave me help when my heating went out in that snowstorm. You said not to worry." Clarissa cut in, lips tight. "Yes, well, now we need to revisit that." Brent motioned toward the man in the suit. "This is Jeff Withers, our legal advisor." My knees buckled, but I didn't fall. "Legal advisor?" Clarissa handed me a folded document. "It's just a promissory note, Lorraine. You said you'd pay us back, and we think it's fair to make it official. Family or not." The room swayed. My own son had invited me here, not to celebrate, but to corner me. The turkey on the table steamed silently. The cranberry sauce shimmered like blood under the lights. Everything felt twisted. Clarissa kept talking, but her words blurred. All I could hear was the sound of betrayal clanging louder than any dinner bell. They wanted me to sign something I never agreed to, and they chose Thanksgiving of all days to do it, surrounded by fake cheer and legal threats. I didn't say a word. Not yet. Because what they didn't know was, I hadn't come just with cobbler. There was something else in my purse. Something with a black handle and gold lettering that read Dorsey and Keller Law Group. And just as Brent leaned in, placing a pen in front of me, I looked up, dead in his eyes, and said, "You should have waited until dessert. I didn't come alone." If you're already hooked, subscribe now so you don't miss what Lorraine does next. This isn't just Thanksgiving. This is justice served hot. You should have seen the look on Clarissa's face when I reached into my purse and pulled out that folder. She had the gall to chuckle. "Lorraine, what is that, your grocery list?" Brent looked puzzled, then a little pale. I gently laid the black folder on the polished oak table. The same table I had once helped them pay for when they bought the house. Back when we still had something that resembled a family. "No," I said calmly. "That's from my attorney. And it outlines every penny I ever gave you, plus receipts." I opened the flap slowly. Inside were scans, bank statements, and handwritten notes I'd kept for years. I may have been old, but I wasn't stupid. And I certainly wasn't forgetful. Clarissa scoffed. "That's not legal documentation." "I believe it is," I said softly. "And so does my legal team. You see, this little loan you're talking about? I never signed anything. But here," I tapped one of the highlighted pages, "is the transfer you made into my account after the snowstorm. Marked as gift, house repairs." Brent's lips moved, but no sound came. "And this," I continued, sliding out a dated email, "is where you said, quote, 'You've given us everything, Mom. Let us help now.'" End quote. The lawyer they'd hired, Mr. Withers, shifted uncomfortably. I wasn't done. "Mr. Withers," I said, locking eyes with him, "you might want to advise them not to extort a senior citizen with documented evidence of financial coercion. Because that's a felony." Silence. Not even the gravy dared to bubble. Clarissa broke first. "This is outrageous," she snapped. "We're your family." I tilted my head. Family doesn't ambush someone on a holiday with a fake debt. Brent's shoulders slumped. He didn't defend her. He didn't even defend himself. I stood. "This was your Thanksgiving plan?" I asked, voice trembling. Not with fear, but fury. To serve turkey and treachery on the same plate? Clarissa stood too. "You should be thankful we even invited you." The audacity. "You think I don't know what you're doing?" I said. "Trying to control me, isolate me, guilt me into handing over what's left of my savings. You thought I wouldn't fight back." I leaned in, just enough for my words to cut. "You thought wrong." Then I reached for the cobbler on the counter and picked it up calmly. "Enjoy your meal," I said, "because this is the last time you'll ever eat with me under false pretenses." And just as I turned to leave, Mr. Withers quietly muttered, "I think we're done here." Outside, the wind was cold, but my spine was warm. I climbed into the black car waiting at the curb. Inside sat Ms. Trina Daniels, my attorney. A firecracker of a woman with silver braids and sharper instincts than any fox. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded. "Let's make them regret ever thinking your silence meant surrender." If this chapter lit a fire in you, don't forget to subscribe. The real fight is just beginning, and Lorraine isn't done yet. ChatGPT said. Here is Chapter 3 of. They invited me for Thanksgiving just to extort me and humiliate me. Then I brought dessert and a lawyer. Built for a 30 to 35-minute YouTube runtime with emotional pacing and layered revelations. Chapter 3. The car ride with Trina was quiet at first. The kind of quiet that follows betrayal. The kind that hums low in your chest like a distant storm. I stared out the window at the bare trees and dim streetlights. It was Thanksgiving night, but instead of feeling full and warm, I felt cold to my core. "Lorraine," Trina said gently, "you did the right thing. You didn't yell. You didn't curse. You handled that with grace." I smiled faintly. Grace is all I've ever had to survive on. We pulled up to the little brick duplex I'd been renting for the past few months. Ever since Clarissa suggested I move out so they could renovate the basement. But I knew the truth. They wanted me out of sight. Clarissa didn't like how I dressed. Said I looked too old school. She once told me that my presence made their friends uncomfortable. That I embarrassed Brent with my knitted cardigans and soft-spoken ways. But what cut deepest wasn't her cruelty. It was Brent's silence. That silence had roots. Long roots. Trina helped me into the house and warmed up some tea. I sat on the floral armchair by the window, the same one I'd rescued from my old living room. "You ready to talk strategy?" she asked, flipping open her notebook. I nodded. I was ready. "I've drafted a formal notice," she said. "We're serving them with a cease and desist. No more contact unless it's in writing. And we're filing for emotional elder abuse. I've got a solid case." I took a deep breath. "Do I have to see them again?" "Not unless you want to." I exhaled. Good. Because I gave them everything. My savings. My home. My time. And they turned it into a power play. Trina closed the notebook. "Now it's your turn to take something back." That night, I couldn't sleep. The memories came flooding in. Brent's first tooth. His prom night. The way he used to run into my arms after school. Was that boy still in there somewhere? Or had Clarissa buried him beneath her smirks and schemes? I walked slowly into my tiny kitchen, opened the drawer, and pulled out the old key ring I hadn't touched in months. The house key. My house. I still owned 47% of that property. Legally. Quietly. Because when Brent begged me to help buy it, I'd insisted on having my name on the deed. He never thought I'd use it. But as I stared at that key, glinting under the kitchen light, I realized something. They hadn't just invited me to dinner. They'd invited a reckoning. If this chapter made you think about the hidden power in silence, hit subscribe. Lorraine's just getting started, and what comes next will shock you. 2 days later, I stood outside the house I once called home. Same beige siding. Same shutters. Same white porch swing I used to sit on with Brent during spring storms when he was a boy. But now, the place felt foreign. like a childhood photo of someone else's life. Trina parked discreetly down the block. "You sure you want to do this today?" she asked. I stared at the house. Yes. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to observe. Because that house was still partly mine. And they didn't know I'd hired a private appraiser, a real estate attorney, and 2 contractors to quietly inspect it while they were gone for the weekend. Clarissa had taken Brent and their kids to some retreat, spa, probably using the last of my pension payments. She thought I was weak. Forgettable. But I'd been preparing this moment for months. While they were busy planning my financial funeral, I had been laying bricks for my resurrection. Inside the house, my team took photos, reviewed the title, evaluated the condition, and quietly assessed property tax irregularities. By noon, Trina handed me the results. "Lorraine, I think you're going to like this," she said, flipping through the file. "They missed a mortgage payment. They refinanced in your name without disclosing it fully, and your stake gives you legal grounds to force a sale." I stared at her. "You mean I can sell it out from under them, if you want, or force a buyout, or take back occupancy?" The idea of walking back in there, not as a guest, but as an owner, sent chills down my arms. But it wasn't about revenge. It was about dignity. They had mocked me, used me, fed me lies and leftovers. And now I was done asking for respect. I was going to take it. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, tracing the corners of the old house key again. I made myself a plate of baked salmon, buttered carrots, and a warm roll. I ate slowly, mindfully, because this time next week, they would learn something Clarissa had never understood. You don't invite a woman to dinner to break her and expect her to go home hungry. Some of us show up with dessert. And lawyers. Lorraine isn't finished. She's just stepping into her power. Subscribe to stay with her as she reclaims what's hers. One key, one clause, and one courtroom at a time. The letter arrived on a Monday. Clarissa called me that evening, voice sharp with panic. "Did you send us legal papers?" I sipped my tea before answering. "I did." "You can't do this, Lorraine. This is our house now." "Is it?" I asked softly. "Because the deed says otherwise." She stammered. "Brent said you gave up your rights." "No," I interrupted, calm as ever. "I gave up my bedroom, not my equity. And I've been very quiet. Until now." There was a pause. Then the click of disconnection. I didn't hear from Brent. Not that day. Not the next. But Clarissa called again 2 mornings later, this time with a different tone. "You're ruining this family." I nearly laughed. "Clarissa, I was the one you locked in the cold basement and fed scraps to. You called me a burden, not family. Let's not pretend now." That Friday, Trina and I filed a legal motion of partition, forcing the court to either divide or sell the house. The judge gave Brent and Clarissa 30 days to respond. Word got around town fast. My old church friends texted. My neighbor down the street left a pie with a note that said, "You go, Lorraine." Even the postman grinned as he handed me a stack of mail. "You always were sharper than they thought," he said. But in private, I still cried some nights. Not for regret, but for the boy I'd raised who never fought for me. One evening, as the rain tapped on the roof, Trina came by. "Lorraine, do you want to see them again?" "Maybe," confront Brent. I hesitated. Then I shook my head. "I don't need a scene," I said. "They wrote me off. But they're about to read what I've written." I had been journaling. Every insult. Every time Clarissa smirked as she dropped leftovers in front of me. Every look of indifference from Brent as I limped up the stairs. And soon, I'd publish those pages. Not out of spite, but legacy. So the next generation would understand. Silence is not submission. And humility isn't weakness. Because some grandmothers don't just knit. They build cases. Like Lorraine's strength? Then don't miss what she's about to do next. Hit that subscribe button. The hearing was set for the following Monday. I walked into that courthouse with my back straight, wearing a navy blue coat I'd sewn myself 30 years ago. My silver hair was pinned neatly, and Trina walked beside me like a lioness guarding royalty. Clarissa and Brent were already seated. He didn't meet my eyes. Clarissa, though, wore a smug expression that slipped the moment she saw Trina's briefcase and the copies of the deed, the financial records, and a log of every pension withdrawal I never approved. Trina leaned toward me and whispered, "They expected a fuss, not a file." The judge looked over the paperwork in silence for a long stretch. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Mrs. Lorraine Winter owns 47% of the property, co-signed the original mortgage, and retains legal standing to initiate a forced sale or financial buyout. If no agreement is reached within 14 days, the property will be sold and divided accordingly." Clarissa stood up, voice high. "You can't do this. This was supposed to be our forever home." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Then perhaps you should have treated your co-owner like family." Outside the courthouse, a reporter approached us. Trina gently ushered them away, but I stopped her. "Let her ask," I said. "Mrs. Winter," the young woman said, "what made you finally fight back?" I smiled gently. "Because sometimes the last straw isn't the biggest offense," I said. "It's the smallest cruelty repeated too many times." That night, Brent called me. For the first time in months. "Mom," he said, voice low. "I'm sorry. I waited." That night, Thanksgiving, I didn't know it had gone that far. "You did," I replied, voice calm. "You just didn't want to choose between your wife and your mother." He sighed. "She's talking about moving out. We don't know what to do." I said nothing for a moment. Then, figure it out. Like I did. Alone. And I hung up. I went to bed that night with my hand on the old house key, still on my nightstand. And for the first time in years, I didn't dream of regret. I dreamt of rebuilding. To be continued. If you're rooting for Lorraine, don't scroll past. Like, comment, and subscribe, because this chapter will show just how much power one woman can hold when she stops shrinking. 2 weeks passed. Brent and Clarissa didn't make an offer. They didn't negotiate. They simply vanished. When the house went on the market, Trina called me. "They've moved out. No forwarding address listed." I stood at my window, watching golden leaves fall over my yard like soft confetti. It was poetic. The season was ending, just like the years of disrespect, dismissal, and pain. The house sold quickly. Not because of its condition, but because I had done the homework, fixed what needed fixing, priced it right, and included a letter about its history. A family with 3 kids bought it. A sweet woman named Tara even promised to keep the porch swing. The check came in mid-December. A figure with more zeros than I'd ever held. But money wasn't the victory. The silence was. No more walking on eggshells. No more fake smiles at dinner tables that weren't mine. No more swallowing leftover pain. I used a portion of the money to buy a small craftsman-style home near the lake. Sunlight filled every room. I planted herbs on the porch and joined a book club with women who called me by name, not liability. The rest of the money? I started a fund. The Lorraine Fund for Women in Silence. We help women who've been emotionally abandoned, manipulated, or forgotten by their own families. We provide legal aid, housing options, and dignity. One chilly afternoon, I stood at our first support group meeting, looking around the room at women with quiet tears and trembling hands. I cleared my throat. "My name is Lorraine Winter. Some of you were told you're too old. A burden. Worth less than your silence." I paused. "Well, I'm here to say they were wrong. You are not a burden. You are the foundation." The room exhaled. Later, as I packed up, I found a note tucked under my chair. It said, "You made me believe again." And in that moment, I knew this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about restoration. Not just for me, but for every woman who'd ever been fed scraps when she deserved a seat at the head of the table. If this story touched your heart, don't scroll past. Like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe for the final chapter. Because Lorraine's journey isn't over. And trust me, her next move will surprise you. A week before Christmas, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, Brent stood there. Alone. No Clarissa. No apology rehearsed. Just a duffel bag and eyes that looked older than the man I'd raised. "Mom," he said, "I don't know where else to go." I didn't move. I left her. I should have done it years ago, but I was afraid. I stepped aside, not out of softness, but out of curiosity. He sat at my kitchen table like he used to as a boy, shoulders hunched, waiting for punishment or mercy. "I watched that video," he said. "What video?" "The one from the fun launch, where you told those women they were not invisible, that they were the foundation." I didn't realize he'd seen it. He wiped his face. "You were talking to them, but I felt like you were talking to me, too, about choosing better, about standing up." I said nothing. He added, "I've lost a lot, Mom." I looked him dead in the eyes. "So have I." That night, he slept on the couch, and I stared at the ceiling long after the lights were off. Could trust be rebuilt? Could damage be undone? The next morning, Brent made coffee. He folded my blankets, fed the cat, and didn't ask for a thing. Later that week, Trina stopped by. I pulled her aside. "He's back. But I don't know if I can let him stay." Trina nodded. "You don't have to decide now. Just don't let guilt make your decisions for you." The next day, something unexpected arrived in the mail. An invitation. A National Women's Leadership Conference had selected me as their keynote speaker. They had seen my speech. They had read about the fund. They wanted me. Lorraine Winter. Basement survivor. Unpaid bill bearer. Dessert and lawyer bringer. I stood in the mirror that night in a dress I hadn't worn in 10 years. It still fit, and in the reflection, I didn't see someone discarded. I saw someone rising. Lorraine is about to take the biggest stage of her life and finally say everything she's been too polite to say for decades. The ballroom was grand, crystal chandeliers, velvet-draped tables, and a microphone that hummed softly under the weight of silence. I stood backstage, palms pressed together. It was my first time speaking to a crowd like this. Not as someone's mother. Not as someone's burden. As me. Lorraine Winter. Trina gave my shoulder a light squeeze. "You earned this." When they called my name, I walked onto the stage with slow, deliberate steps. The applause was polite until I reached the mic. Then I began. "My name is Lorraine, and a year ago, I spent Thanksgiving being humiliated by my own family in a house I helped build, eating a dessert I brought while they laughed behind my back." The room went still. I was too old for them. Too plain. Too much. So they served me shame with side dishes and smiles. But I brought something they didn't expect, proof. And someone who knew how to use it. Light laughter. Then silence again. I stand here today because I chose not to stay in the basement. Because I remembered who I was before they convinced me I was no one. My voice cracked slightly. I stand here not in bitterness, but in clarity. I didn't come to shame anyone. I came to say, you are allowed to outgrow the people who keep shrinking you. Applause broke out. You are allowed to leave tables where love is conditional. You are allowed to start over at 75 or 85 or 105. You are not too late. You are not too much. You are enough. The ovation was thunderous. Not for perfection, but for truth. Later, backstage, Brent was waiting. He looked at me, not as a child looks at a parent, but as a man looks at a survivor. "I watched every word," he whispered. "You were amazing." I nodded. "I wasn't speaking to you, but I'm glad you listened." We walked out together, slowly, quietly. He wasn't staying in my home. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But we were walking side by side. That was enough for now. A few months later, the Lorraine Fund opened its second center. This one had a kitchen where women made pies from scratch and shared stories about years they thought they wouldn't survive. I told them mine, and they told me theirs. Sometimes, the dessert isn't the revenge. It's the rebuilding. And sometimes, the sweetest justice is living a life they said you didn't deserve. After the speech, I stepped off the stage into a corridor of handshakes, hugs, and heartfelt thank yous from strangers who no longer felt alone. A young woman clutched my hand and said, "My mom needs to hear what you just said." So, do I. Outside the venue, the winter air hit my face like a soft slap. Cold, honest, and cleansing. Brent was waiting by the car. He held it open for me, without a word. We drove in silence for a while, past glittering holiday lights and quiet houses tucked into suburban calm. Then he said, "You're not the same woman from last Thanksgiving." "No," I replied. "I remember who I was now. And I'm never forgetting her again." He swallowed hard, then reached into the glove compartment and handed me a thick envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter and a check. "I sold the car," he said. "And I ended that joint account Clarissa used. I don't want your money anymore. I just want to fix what I broke." I looked down at the check, then back at him. "Fixing things doesn't come with interest rates, Brent. It comes with action.
Time.
Humility." He nodded, eyes glistening. "Then I'll start there." The new Lorraine Center opened in a historic brownstone building downtown. The ribbon cutting was modest, but the turnout wasn't. Women who had lost homes, marriages, voices, stood beside each other as we hung their stories on the walls like art. We didn't erase pain. We reframed it. One woman, Rosa, brought her daughter to the center. The girl had been failing in school after witnessing years of domestic fights. "I heard what you said in that conference," Rosa told me. "You helped me believe I wasn't the cause. I was the survivor." She smiled. "And now I want to help others believe that too." The next morning, the center got its first call from a local high school.
They wanted me to speak.
By spring, we'd been featured in 2 newspapers and 1 television interview. I was no longer the woman invited to dinners just to be silenced. I was the woman others called when they needed strength. Easter Sunday came, and I was setting a table for 2. Brent had asked if he could visit. Clarissa had left town. Rumor had it she drained her own mother's retirement savings and fled to Florida.
I didn't ask.
He brought fresh tulips, store-bought pie, and something I hadn't seen in him for years, humility. After lunch, he asked, "Will you ever forgive me?" I looked at him carefully. Forgiveness is not something you beg for once and expect like a paycheck. It's something you build brick by brick. He nodded slowly. "Then I'll keep building." And for the first time in years, I believed he meant it. Months later, I was invited to be on a national podcast for women over 60. The host asked, "What would you say to someone who feels like their family erased them?" I leaned into the mic. "I'd say you're not a footnote. You're not invisible. You're the full story." I paused, my voice steady now. "And if you're sitting at a table where love feels like a debt, it's time to rise. Bake your own pie. Speak your truth. Bring dessert and a lawyer if you must." The host chuckled, but then got quiet. "That's going to stay with people."
"I hope so," I said.
"Because it stayed with me." 1 year later, I stood outside my house, the same house they tried to trap me in with guilt and dependency. But now the locks were changed. The deed had only one name.
Mine.
A new neighbor waved as I watered my small garden.
"I heard your story," she said.
"You're kind of a legend." I smiled. Just a woman who stopped showing up to her own disrespect. She laughed and walked away. Inside, on the wall above my dining table, hung a simple framed phrase. "You're not too old. They're just too late." Thank you for watching the story to the very end. If Lorraine's journey moved you, like this video to support more stories like this. Share it with someone who needs to remember their worth. And subscribe to this channel because the next story might just be the one you needed all along.